Patrick.
Hey Elijah, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for spending some time talking about creativity and AI.
Happy to.
Yeah.
It's a
I,
subject that me.
yeah. You and I have talked, on a personal level quite a bit about this, just as it's kind of come up, whether it's talking about Ezra Klein podcast or an interesting new feature that we've both heard about. Neither one of us are AI experts or
Agreed.
have gone to the school of AI, but I think we both enjoy exploring and experimenting and like approaching it in a fun way, as well as like looking for ways to have it like built into our tool set. And so I appreciate the conversations always with you about this for those reasons, like to not be afraid of it, to approach it in a way that feels fun and useful, um, and just continue to kind of see where it all goes.
Yeah, it's arrived and is exhilarating. May as well get familiar with what it's good at and what it's less useful for.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can you, I mean, a lot of people watching this will know you from a retreat or just being in the community, but can you give a 30 to 60-second intro of who you are, what you do?
I can, but it would take me 15 minutes.
Hey, you know what? 15 minutes is okay.
No, I have been an entrepreneur most of my life, but I have had a creative thread running through almost all of my entrepreneurial life. In my 20s, I was a full-time musician, and it was during a time when the technology that was very disruptive and controversial was MIDI synthesizers, drum machines. And so, having watched the love-hate relationship, passionate feelings for and against that technology, you'll find that that will inform some of the questions, at least that I have now, the things that interest me about this wave of where AI meets music. But anyway, did that in my 20s, and the next 30 years was not the creative person in a design firm, was running the business. My ex-wife business partner was a very good creative director, but I just absorbed a lot, really loved, I still love working with creative people. I was the non-creative person in a creative business, and it that inevitable tension between creative expression and commercial demands. I just saw that in so many different combinations and permutations over 30 years. That also causes me, I think, or helps stoke my interest in where technology meets creativity.
Mm.
For the last 7 years or so, I've been an executive coach with the Telos Institute, working with, in some cases, creative entrepreneurs, other entrepreneurs, C-suite executives, on just how to learn, grow, develop themselves, and become more resilient, increase their capacity to deal with rapid change. Again, here we are with AI. We can all develop our capacity to deal with and be resilient in the face of rapid disruptive change. So that's as brief as I could make it.
Hey, that was perfect. Yeah. I won't even have to use an AI tool to give me a summary of your.
Oh, I would like to see that.
That would be funny. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting to think back. There's so many of these examples, but you bring up a really interesting one of MIDI and sampling and synthesizing and things like that. That was a big disruption, right? And it's interesting to think now it's just so common that, and it's made music so much more accessible across the board. Um, in a variety of ways, right? Like, and
Yeah.
sometimes in good ways and sometimes in like, we maybe we don't need to sample this most random thing, but now we can actually do it. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Agreed.
that is an interesting disruption that happened. What was that in the 80s? When was,
80s.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
40 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, like what is AI, what is it going to look like in 40 years? And we look back at this disruption and we're like having the same type of conversation.
The time frame is interesting. because that evolved fairly slowly. And then my recollection was it was kind of the mid 90s when the idea of whether or not one needed to have an email address. I knew other people in our industry that were like, oh, this internet thing's passing fad. I don't like it. I don't want to work at it. If I have to work at a computer all day, I'll shoot myself in the head. Like,
Yeah.
and passionate feelings about that. In some cases, by passionate opinions from people who hadn't looked at it at all, hadn't really thought deeply about it. And for me, I think we all have to at least spend a little bit of time before we have a strong opinion, making sure we have a good enough understanding of the new technology. I
Mhm.
have a memory of dozens of people with really strong opinions about music technology that knew nothing about it. They assumed the worst. They assumed it was crude, lifeless, dehumanizing, unnecessary, and rejected it. Those people, and with the exception of a couple of individuals who were so extraordinarily talented that they could ignore it and still keep very busy as working musicians, the people who thrived were the people whose identity, their sense of themselves as a creative person wasn't super narrow. Like, I'm a piano player in this style. It was, I'm a creative person in music. Oh, the game's changing. Oh, cool. I can't do some of those things I used to do, or I can't make as much money with it, maybe. But there are all these new things. I'm creative. Where can I play now? Those people tended to thrive. And the shift in technology tended to favor people whose temperament was not resistant to change. And we're
Mm.
not all like that. Human nature is we are inherently resistant, all of us, to too much change too fast.
Yeah.
But some people have a little easier time with that. Those people tended to have an easier transition. People who were resistant to change and didn't want to be out of their comfort zone, uh, it was a much harder path.
Yeah, so many things have come to mind just in the past couple minutes, like uh, with MIDI or with sampling. There's there's a ton of possibilities, but it's fairly finite in like understanding what that technology is. Like there's kind of this like
Mhm.
baseline. MIDI is sending ones and zeros to trigger something to happen. And then you can kind of those things can all be different things, but like at a base level, you can kind of understand it quickly. Same thing with sampling. It's you can explain it in a sentence, record an instrument, get triggered by a MIDI signal to be played through your speakers, and you're not at that instrument anymore, whatever. That's a terrible sentence and a half way of saying it. But
Oh,
point being is like it's simple,
can I
not
interrupt
easy,
you?
yeah, sure.
Compared to AI, yes. But
Yeah,
at the time, people were baffled. So many musicians, I have to learn all these with codes and how do I cable this up?
yeah.
It felt very complex in that time, in that context.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that's kind of where I was going with it too, of it doesn't feel like we can make that same summarizing statement with AI as a whole and creativity because we
Yeah,
don't have a sense of all those parts yet. And it's only because
agreed.
we can look back with 40 years of experience and summarize a technology, at such a high level. Like I don't have a sense of what that single sentence is going to be about create like creating music or being a musician and having this like supplement of AI. Do you have a sense of what that could be?
Oh gosh, no, but I don't think, like, if we look back 40 years, I think that the nature of exponential change, which is what we're going through, I can't even imagine 3 to 5 years out, let alone 40. It's moving that quickly. And we talked about this over the prior days. The Ezra Klein interviews
Hmm.
with a variety of AI experts, and especially Dario Amodei.
Hmm.
Was he from Anthropic? I'm trying to
I
remember
think
where.
so. Yeah.
And And he kind of made bold and underlined that notion of exponential change and how non-intuitive it is. We think of linear change, like, well, the last 40 years, next 40 years. He's suggesting that the next, well, on a couple of the topics they were discussing, he said, oh, no, it's not going to be a decade. It's going to be the next 18 to 24
Yeah.
months
Yeah.
because it's changing so quickly. And we our nervous systems just aren't wired to process and adapt to that. So, um,
Yeah. So do you, I get, I get that we ought to be open to change and open to new technology. We're also kind of being, in some ways, people see this as like an existential crisis of,
yeah,
it's going to take, whether you're if you're a hobbyist, you can keep doing your hobby for as long as you want. It doesn't matter. Just don't use AI, or like, don't be intimidated by it because you're fulfilling a hobby. You're not trying to make money.
right.
But somebody who might see AI as competition, it's like we're adding another full-time job of just learning and keeping up with that exponential change. Like it's a whole different task now because of how quick it's all moving.
Yeah, it's thrilling and terrifying at the same time. uh, uh,
Yeah.
the creative options that will be provided for professional musicians and amateur musicians are amazing. They're really exciting, and it's going to be, as you suggested, really disruptive. So, a lot of jobs are going to disappear, and not just in music, in law, in medicine,
Yeah.
accounting, finance, everywhere. It hasn't really started in a big way yet, but what I've read, and I'm sure what you've read, suggests there's a little bit of a lag here, but it's starting to ripple out. All companies are moving as quickly as they can to embrace this because they know if they don't, they'll be gone. That's the assumption in the
Hmm.
C-suite with most companies. So,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
individuals, as solo entrepreneurs, as musicians, we have to think that, what does that mean for us? And there's no easy answers, but
Mhm.
staying engaged in it, talking with others about it, doing some reading, listening to some podcasts as one has time and interest for. I think it's important. There's a point, if you fall too far behind, it just feels like a steeper and steeper hill to get up. Where if you just spend a little bit of time as you're able to, you can then have those conversations as they come up and feel like you're not falling too far behind and it feels accessible. Uh, this is my personal bias, obviously, is to do it that way. There are probably reasons for and against anything you and I might suggest in this conversation. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that makes sense for people who are depending on this for their livelihood.
Yeah, and there are plenty of free ways to interact
Yeah.
with it, right? Like Chat GPT. There's a whole slew of free things that you can do. So it's not like it requires an investment or something like that. I
Well,
think.
even the investment is so low now for most
Sure.
people. If you pick one of the tools and get all the premium benefits, it's $20 a month.
Yeah.
If you're a professional, ideally that should be easy to justify, even just in if it helps you create a practice plan, a contract for a gig, some social media posts, and so forth, which is very good, very quick at.
Yeah. I think that it's a good segue because the thing that I'm excited about, like genuinely excited, not just like not scared. I'm actually excited about being being able to use AI to do things for myself and for others, but being able to do things that like we don't want to do. Like think of any songwriter or musician or people, like the age old thing to say is like, I just want to play music. I don't want to have to do all of that other stuff. And it's like now we're in we're in a spot where it's like, yeah, you actually don't have to do all of that stuff.
Right.
You probably have to build something so that it can get going and stuff. like that, it's not just like a flick of a switch. There is work still to be done, but then it's like, yeah, you don't have to build your social media strategy in your mind and learn all of the social media algorithms. Like, you don't have to do that anymore. So like that should be an exciting thing, um, rather than
Agreed.
fearful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great place to jump in and start experimenting too. And you're right, you have to spend a little bit of time up front, but then it will save you so many hours once you simply learn the tool. And it's not learning coding or
Hmm.
computer programming, it's just learning a tool. And there's a world of YouTube videos for any tool you want to learn. If it's ChatGPT, a quick search on YouTube for mastering social media on YouTube, it, you're up and running. And a couple of evenings, do you think is probably a good foundation?
Let's say, I mean, I don't know, but I would guess if you spent 10 hours
Yeah,
building some of that. So however you split that up, probably
yeah,
it's a good spot. I mean, I haven't done that. I should make that as clear as possible. But it is, it those are the things that I would be more excited about, exploring and trying. Um,
yeah. That's my sense of it too, is it's about that amount of time to get a good foundation, which will then save you many dozens of hours ongoing after you have the tools up.
yeah. Um, what so I think we can probably wrap up with a couple questions, and these are kind of advice based questions, just based on how much you've used specifically Chat GPT 4, which is part of the, at least right now, the paid platform. But there's one thing that you've used and you've talked about, like creating personas, like to for different perspectives. Does that make?
Yeah, in ChatGPT, the paid version, there's custom instructions, and they may have changed. They keep updating this so quickly. They may have
Mhm.
changed that title, but it's not hard to find. You go into your profile, and there's some choices, and it might be under personalized now, and then custom instructions. But basically, you tell it who you want it to be. So if I was helping my wife create a plan for her yoga classes coming up, I'd say, ChatGPT, you are a 20-year yoga instructor. You have expertise in these disciplines, this background. Uh, Describe that ideal mentor for her to help her set up the classes. The second part of that aspect of the program says, how would you like the output to your questions formatted? So you can say, please give me a class of whatever length I specify. And in each instance, give me the pose, the physiology of it, the physical benefits, and give me some philosophical background from the yogic tradition of what that means in one's spiritual growth. She likes to tie that in, at least in a light way. And so now, pulling up that persona, she doesn't have to type all that in as part of the prompt. She just pulls in the persona, and any conversation she has, it might be strategically building her brand in a certain way and using ChatGPT as a mentor, or it might be a discrete, I have a 45-minute class that has to be extended to 90 minutes. Adapt it for me. And it assumes that persona, and it creates it based on, as if the ChatGPT were that mentor. So you
Mhm.
can easily imagine how that could work with songwriting, lyrics, production, marketing. It's very robust in what it pulls for marketing. So use it as a mentor for marketing.
Yeah,
Does that answer your question?
yeah, totally it does. It's interesting to think of using it as a mentor in that way. More so, it's interesting because like we would never see Google as a mentor, right? But it's like you could Google just a standard search, something like that, like, and hope to
Yeah.
find it, right? Like a guide that includes all of these things for a 90-minute class. Maybe you'll find one or four of them or 10, whatever. But the thing that's just absolutely crazy about chat gpt and ai is she can create as many of those now as she wants, and like those things didn't exist before, probably, in that form.
So many so quickly, no ads to sort through, and she doesn't have to look through all the junk that isn't what she wants. It's giving her exactly what she wants. And of course, it's not to overstate the benefit. You don't always get 100% of what you want. There's sort of an art in the initial prompt being clear enough, but if what she gets is 90% of the way there and she wants it to finish, she treats it just as she would if it were a human assistant. Like, that was great. Thanks so much. But I need more detail in these three areas. And then
Mhm.
it comes back in 15 or 20 seconds with that new revision that's
Yeah.
99%.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great, and definitely something I want to spend time exploring. I recently started. I have the paid version of Chat GPT 4 or 4.0 now, or whatever they're calling it.
Right.
Um, and I haven't built those personas yet, but I'm very interested in exploring that. And so I guess my final question for this session, at least, is
And I have a question for you as well before we
sure.
close out.
Who should go first? Should we play rock, paper, scissors?
Yes.
All right, just one time.
With the latency, I think we'd have a
Oh
problem.
yeah, it's not gonna work well. I'll go first if that's okay.
Okay.
Um,
Yes.
you've mentioned this a few times on the call, and I think this is a very common problem is like learning to prompt it well.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we were even talking about this really quickly before we started recording, but you look at an AI generated image, and sometimes you can look at it and say like, oh yeah, that's that's AI. It's like fairly obvious in a sense. And then there's a whole slew of things where it's like you could look at a whole artist's portfolio and not know it's AI at all, because and the difference is like one person prompted well, one person didn't prompt well.
Hmm.
So through your own exploration, what do you have any like tips or things that you started to do, or a format that you use when you're going about prompting? Really, I guess for anything, I'm being as wide open as possible, but maybe that's not helpful.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, you're, I get the direction you're pointing. Uh, uh, I do think that these models are evolving so that they're easier to talk to the way you would talk to another human being. So talk to it as if you're talking to another person with as much precision of language as you can muster up, because those little details with precise language matter. I have, when I've prompted something and not gotten quite what I wanted, I'll then say, what prompt did you use to create that? It doesn't use what I put in exactly. It takes my prompt, it compares it to other similar requests and what the end results were to try and be more intelligent about getting me what I want. So if
Mm,
I ask it what prompt it used, it will give me kind of what it used behind the scenes, and I can intervene and go, oh, that's what I need to be more specific about.
hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, a few times, anytime that I've used it to do like a generative thing, I try and be as specific as possible. And sometimes it's like, if it's an image, let's say, I was just messing with this the other day just to see what the results would be. And yeah, it's funny to think that you're being precise, and then you see the result and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I totally understand why you did this, because I said muted colors, and in my mind muted colors is like this subset of even less colors. So I would have to say muted versions of da 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 da."
Yeah. And that's going to get easier almost as we're speaking, because that's new version of Chat GPT. The features were announced but not enabled yet. So it will assess an image or a video that you provide. So you could feed in when you say muted colors, here's my muted color palette.
Mm,
Use that on the new image.
yeah.
Saves a lot of language.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, I mean, four more questions popped into my mind, but
Well, you
are
could
there
edit
for
this
yours?
down later to your heart's content.
Oh, it's all, yeah, it's all good. What you said that you had a question too.
Yeah, so in some areas, the Suno and Udio are just prompt-driven music generators, and some of what they put out is very cheesy and so obviously AI, and some of it's startlingly good. So I think we can, given that ChatGPT and the rest of the tools like Suno and Udio, and apparently 11 Labs is also getting into this soon,
Mm,
it will soon be indistinguishable from artist created music. If it gets to the point soon where you listen to two songs and you're not told in advance, they're indistinguishable, and you really love the one that was created by AI, how much does that matter to you? Does a
mm,
work stand on its own merit, or is it a reflection of its lineage to a human or an AI? And should that always be disclosed? And does it matter? Should it be disclosed before and it might then affect our judgment, or disclosed after? This is whole new territory for the human race to be making these kind of discernments.
yeah. Yeah, my short answer is I don't know. I'll have to experience it once or twice and then see how I feel in all of those ways. Yeah, I think I guess to go a little bit more into that, I want to think that there's some redeeming factor of just appreciating art, like having that same mindset that we've had under the assumption that a human created it is like art is art and we can appreciate the fact that it was created, and I don't have to impose like my subjective taste to it. It's like I can just appreciate that it exists
Yeah.
as an observer. If we're going to proceed and say, to add to that statement and say only if it was created by a human, then it gets really complicated, because then you're attempting to make that judgment call. And if you aren't told before, then as you're experiencing it, you're probably going to be asking yourself that question and distracted
Yeah.
by not knowing, is this AI or not? And I think that's what I would be the most frustrated with, is like introducing this new distraction into the listening process. So
Yeah.
I guess as I'm rambling through this, I'd rather probably just know at the beginning and trust that for myself, there will be a way to appreciate it or just be cynical about it. I really don't know what my ultimate feelings are going to be. I'm always going to appreciate more if it's a human that created it, but that doesn't mean that I can't at least enjoy something that was created by AI. And we've talked about this before, right? And maybe this is opening up a different can of worms, but if I were to go into Chat GPT and do one of the simplest things, right? Like write me a poem in this particular format and use the writings of Hemingway as a reference for style choosings and word choice and things like that. It's like, okay, well, is Hemingway getting paid because the work is being referenced? And I've done that with other songwriters too. Like, use this person as an example. Here's the topic. Like, write three stanzas for a verse. And I've never used it because it's never felt like it was even 50% of the way there. But still, it's like, it is that person actually, they talk about this in that Dario podcast.
Right.
Like, is that person owed some kind of royalty because this technology is using their persona to presumably sell something, if like we're premium users of this platform, right? So like maybe it's
Yeah.
just a premium user thing. But when you and I were talking about this before, you brought up a really good point, and I think Ezra Klein brought this up too, and it's just to say we're doing that all the time as humans. Like we're not
Yeah.
we're not paying everybody we've ever been affected by on every decision that we're making that most definitely has they've had an impact on. And so that is also a really interesting discernment or awareness that I'm like having a hard time with in my mind, because I want to say like the artist should get paid, but it's only because it's going through a technology that's servicing it, but it's doing it so quickly and effortlessly. It feels not wrong, but like somebody should be benefiting from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so you're willing to waive a licensing fee if a human's influenced by you, but if
Right.
AI is
Yeah,
being
right.
influenced by you in a
Yeah.
similar way,
Yeah.
some and current copyright law won't protect that. So does copyright law need to change dramatically? It probably will have to, but how? And there'll be such competing factions. Those with the most lawyers may win. Who knows? That doesn't always happen, but we have to consider that may happen. And if I ask AI a year from now, that could easily do this, I presume. Uh, I've written this song, improve it, and um, do create a voice that sounds just like Adele
Mm,
to sing it. Well, I think copyright law um, will govern that and protect Adele. But if I say create a new voice that's halfway between Adele and Beyonce, and that voice, like I don't disclose that, it's just a new voice, like a human that was influenced by those singers. And you gotta go, oh, she sounds a little bit like her and a little bit like her. What do you do about those that are in fact a new voice that aren't directly derivative but are influenced by the other two? There's the
mm.
ethical aspect of it, and that's a little easier to talk about. Yes, somebody here should get acknowledgement and payment. What payment by whom, how much? But how do the laws catch up with whatever we agree the ethical approach is? And I don't even know if you'd get easy agreement on the ethical aspect.
Right. Yeah, and there are so many other factors too of like what's your intent of it? Are you doing that to just play? Because fine. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like do the play, it doesn't matter. It's but if you're trying to build a brand and a persona and you're that is kind of your thing, that your brand that you're building, that feels different than just play. Um, so then how do you control for that? What's the threshold of okay, this is going beyond play, so now you're subject to these other rules or whatever, ethically or legally, that it's so hard when things are moving this fast to have these like big line in the sand things. That's just kind of impossible, and we're learning as we go, it seems. uh
yeah.
yeah.
I heard, I jotted this quote down. I heard this in an interview with Tristan Harris. The quote's from uh, an American writer, a biologist, I think, or an anthropologist, E.O. Wilson. And he said, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology.
Mm,
And I mean, as applied to music in this conversation, but as you broaden this to, an upcoming election or displacement of jobs, financial markets, the economy. Like our institutions are lagging so far behind, and our emotions dealing with this were evolved for a whole different set of problems.
Yeah, right.
And these powers that we're being granted are pretty daunting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
That's
to end on such a terrifying note, is there
I was
something
just
light we
about
can end with?
just about to make the same comment. No, I think my summary would be there's so much potential usefulness out of all of these AI tools that I hope for myself and for others, I hope that we can approach them in a way and get the usefulness out of it rather than like stay away from it because of these big and complex questions that we need to ask ourselves, but that's not a reason to stay away from all of it. Get use the things that are useful and, you know, explore and experiment and find what your own version of success looks like with utilizing the tools. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's so
I think I think not interacting with it at all is probably a mistake. But everyone has their own kind of internal measuring stick, for what they're capable of and interested in doing with this
yeah.
wildly quickly changing technology. It's intimidating for sure, but I think it's accessible enough that we can use it for a lot of really useful things, some of which we've discussed already.
Uh, Part of the direction you're pointing is just maintaining a sense of play and curiosity about it and just run some experiments. Go wherever you're interested. We don't have to learn to be programmers to do this. It's not anything that takes a couple of years. We can just jump in and have fun and play.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's so much guidance out there. YouTube has been so helpful. The playing around I've done has been much more productive and efficient and fun because of some great YouTube videos I watched before I jumped in to those custom instructions. They
Mm,
were very confusing the first time I looked at them. I didn't know how to best use them. 20 minutes later, I thought, oh, well, now I can have fun with this. I understand it.
mm,
I think that maintaining that sense of play is fundamental. It's just essential. So
yeah.
wholeheartedly agree.
Cool. Well, thanks, Patrick. And maybe we'll do a every couple months we'll check back in or something like that if we find something fun to share or
Yes.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's assuming it'll continue to evolve and change. What are the odds of that?
Yeah, who knows? I think it might just be a fad.
Okay, Elijah, great
All
talking
right.
with you as always.
You too.